History is full of ghosts. Lost ships, vanished legions, forgotten treasures. I should know. My name is Commander Jorik Kane, and my job is to hunt them. Not on Earth, but in the silent, dust-filled plains of the Moon. I lead the Lunar Archaeology and Salvage Division, a fancy title for what is essentially the solar system's most overqualified team of garbagemen. We find and catalog the debris of the space race, discarded lunar modules, dead rovers, the occasional crash site. It's a quiet, predictable job, steeped in the cold, preserved history of humanity's first steps into the void. Our base of operations is Armstrong City, a sprawling underground complex near the Sea of Tranquility. The team is small, and you get to know each other's habits, fears, and the exact tone of voice that means we have a problem. There was Sam, a grizzled ex-miner who could fix anything from a suit seal to a nuclear reactor, usually while complaining about the quality of the coffee. There was Jian, a young geologist whose passion for lunar rocks was almost infectious. A spark of genuine wonder in our cynical, profit-driven world. And there was me, the historian and mission commander, the one who had to balance the thrill of discovery with the crushing weight of corporate paperwork. The anomaly that would end our quiet existence didn't come from a deep space telescope or a satellite. It came from a routine orbital scan of the Schrödinger Basin, a massive impact crater on the far side of the Moon. The basin is one of the darkest places in the solar system, permanently shrouded in a shadow that hasn't seen sunlight in billions of years. A place of extreme cold and perfect, absolute silence. Jian was running a ground-penetrating radar survey, looking for rare earth metal deposits. Her voice over the comm was tight with confusion, stripped of its usual enthusiasm. "Commander, you need to see this. The GPR is picking up a massive metallic object buried about 50 meters beneath the basin floor. It's big, and the shape is all wrong. It's not natural." On the main screen in the command hub, a 3D wireframe model appeared, rotating slowly. It wasn't a meteor or a natural geological formation. It was long, cylindrical, with a raised structure in the middle. Clean, artificial lines. Sam, leaning over my shoulder, squinted at the screen, sipping his terrible coffee. "That's not a rocket body. Too dense, wrong shape." He set his mug down and tapped a few commands into his own console, running a material analysis algorithm. The results made him fall silent, his usual gruff demeanor evaporating. "Jorik, the composition, it's HY80 steel, an alloy that hasn't been used in military applications for over a century. High tensile, designed for deep-sea pressure." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach, a feeling I hadn't had since my early days in the field. Pull up historical schematics, naval vessels, mid-20th century. The AI sifted through the archives. A moment later, it overlaid a flickering blue blueprint on our wireframe model. It was a perfect match, down to the millimeter. We were looking at a Godot-class submarine, a model used extensively by the United States Navy during World War II. A World War II submarine, buried under 50 meters of rock and moon dust. On the far side of the Moon, the absurdity of it was staggering. A deep-sea vessel designed to fight in the Pacific Ocean was resting in a place that had never known a single drop of water. It had to be an error, a ghost in the machine. But we ran the scans again and again. The object was undeniably there, but the true impossibility, the detail that pushed the situation from bizarre anomaly to reality-breaking event, came an hour later. Our communication techs at Armstrong City patched me through, their voices frantic, tinny with panic. "Commander Kane, we're picking up a signal. It's emanating from the coordinates of your anomaly. It's an old military band, shortwave radio. It's a distress call, Morse code." On my monitor, a series of dots and gashes began to scroll, translated by the AI. But I didn't need the translation. The code was burned into the memory of every commander, a universal cry for help. SOS. The signal was live, a cry for help, broadcast from a 70-year-old ghost buried on the moon. There was no debate. Every regulation, every protocol was thrown out the window. This wasn't salvage anymore. This was a rescue mission, wrapped in the greatest mystery in human history. We loaded up the mole, our heavy-duty excavation vehicle, with cutting equipment, portable lighting, and a full investigation kit. The journey across the lunar surface to the Schrödinger Basin took 3 days. 3 days of agonizing silence inside the cabin. The only sound, the crunch of regolith under our massive wheels, and the faint, steady beep, beep, beep of the distress call in our headphones. 3 days of wild speculation. How did it get here? Was it some secret lost chapter of the space race? An alien abduction? A fold in space-time? We arrived at the designated coordinates. The basin was an ocean of perfect, undisturbed blackness, the sun never rising above its towering rim. The only light came from our vehicle's powerful floodlights, cutting sterile white paths through the dark. For 12 hours, the mole worked, its massive laser drill vaporizing the lunar regolith with a silent, focused intensity. At 50 meters, we hit metal. The unmistakable, riveted steel hull of the submarine. It was scarred and pitted, but remarkably intact, a dark leviathan in our lights. We maneuvered the mole closer, illuminating the hull until we found the name, still faintly visible under a layer of moon dust. USS Manta. Records showed the Manta had been reported lost with all hands in the Pacific in 1944, presumed sunk by a Japanese destroyer during a fierce storm. The distress call was still pulsing, a faint, steady heartbeat from inside the tomb. We cut our way in. Sam used a plasma torch to slice through the conning tower hatch, the molten metal glowing cherry red in the darkness before freezing solid again in the vacuum. The moment the seal was broken, there was a faint hiss. The sub had held its atmosphere for almost a century. I was the first one in, my suit sensors immediately confirming a thin but breathable, nitrogen-heavy atmosphere. The air inside was cold, stale, and smelled of ozone, oil, and something else, something faintly saline, like a distant sea. The emergency lights, powered by some impossible source, flickered to life as my boots touched the deck, casting a dim red glow over the interior. The control room was a time capsule. Bakelite dials, brass levers, analog gauges. Everything was coated in a thin layer of frost. But there was no one there. No bodies, no skeletons. Just an eerie, perfect silence, broken only by the steady beep, beep, beep of the Morse code transmitter, which was operating by itself in the adjacent radio room. A lonely, automated cry in the dark. We moved deeper into the cramped, claustrophobic corridors. The mess hall, with plates and cutlery neatly stowed. The torpedo room, the bronze warheads gleaming under our lights. The engine compartment, a maze of silent diesel engines and electric motors. Every part of the sub was deserted. We found logbooks, their pages brittle but readable, detailing the sub's final patrol in the Pacific. The last entry was abrupt, ending mid-sentence, describing a storm of impossible intensity. We found personal letters, half-eaten cans of food. It was as if the crew of 80 men had simply evaporated in the middle of their duties. "This is wrong." Sam's voice was a low growl in my helmet. He was running a Geiger counter over the bulkheads. No radiation, no signs of a fire or a hull breach. Why would they abandon ship? And where the hell would they go? The answer was waiting for us in the crew's sleeping quarters, the most cramped and human section of the submarine. As we squeezed through the narrow doorway, our lights fell upon the rows of bunks, and we saw them. They weren't bodies. They were outlines, faint, dark smudges on the metal walls and ceilings, shaped like human beings in contorted, screaming poses. They were like the nuclear shadows left at Hiroshima, but three-dimensional, seeming to have a horrifying depth to them. It was as if the crew had been vaporized by some intense, unknown energy, leaving only their final, terrified moments burned into the very structure of the ship. There were 80 shadows, one for every member of the crew. Dr. Thorne, who was monitoring us via a live comms link from the base, was speechless for a moment. His usually calm academic voice was strained. I've never seen anything like it. It's not radiation. It's not heat. The energy required to sublimate 80 human bodies without melting the surrounding metal. It's beyond our physics. And then Gian, who was monitoring our suit cameras from the mole, spoke up, his voice trembling. "Commander, look at the shadows, the ones on the ceiling. Their arms, they aren't pointing at the floor or the walls. They're all pointing up, towards the outer hull." He was right. The crew hadn't been killed by something inside the sub. They had been trying to get away from something outside. As we processed this horrifying revelation, a new sound began. A low, rhythmic, scraping noise. It was coming from outside the submarine. From above us. I keyed my comm. "Gian, report. What do you see? Run a seismic scan." "Nothing, Commander." His voice was panicked. "I'm looking at the exterior camera feeds. There's nothing out there but rock and dust. Seismic is clean." Wait a minute. I'm picking up a vibration, but it's localized, right on top of the sub's hull. The scraping sound grew louder, more insistent. It was the sound of something impossibly heavy being dragged across the submarine's hull. The noise transmitted through the metal. It was coming from the direction of the bow. "We're moving to the forward torpedo room," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to see what's making that noise." We navigated the tight corridors, our hearts pounding in time with the rhythmic scrape thump from outside. We reached the forward torpedo room. It was the only part of the sub with a direct view outside, through the sealed torpedo tubes. I cautiously approached the main tube. I activated my suit's magnetic clamps and climbed onto the torpedo loading rack, peering through the small, thick quartz periscope built into the hatch. What I saw will be burned into my mind forever. The powerful floodlights of the mole illuminated the lunar surface outside, and standing there, in the sterile white light, was a figure. It was wearing an old, atmospheric diving suit, one of the big, bulky Mark V suits from the 1940s, with a heavy copper helmet and 3 round viewports. The suit was dark, rusted, and covered in what looked like frozen, desiccated marine life. It was a deep-sea diver, on the moon, and it was dragging something behind it with a thick, rustic chain, the source of the scraping sound. It was a massive, ancient, barnacle-encrusted ship's anchor. The figure stopped. It slowly turned its heavy copper helmet towards the submarine, towards me, and through the small, circular viewport of its helmet, I saw not a human face, but a single pale blue light, glowing with a cold, ancient, and undeniable intelligence. The distress call in my headphones stopped abruptly. It was replaced by a new message, this one not in Morse code, but a distorted, gurgling voice. A voice that sounded like it was speaking through a mile of water. It crackled with the static of a century-old radio, speaking in perfect 1940s English. "The silent fleet sleeps below," it rasped. "The tide is coming in. The stars are not for you." And then, the figure raised a single heavy, gauntleted hand, and it beckoned to us. "Commander, what is it? What do you see?" Sam's voice yelled from below me, shaking me from my trance. I couldn't answer. I was paralyzed by a cold, primal fear I had never known. The thing outside, it wasn't human. It was something wearing a human shell, a ghost of the deep ocean, woken from its slumber in the driest place imaginable. The ground began to tremble. Not just a small tremor, but a deep, powerful quake that shook the entire submarine. A new alert appeared on my heads-up display. A massive energy surge, originating from directly beneath us. "Gian, what's the GPR showing?" I screamed into the comm. "Commander, the object, the submarine, it's just the tip." His voice was a terrified shriek. "There's something else beneath it. Something massive. A whole fleet of them. They're all activating. The ground is rising. The entire basin floor began to fracture. All around us, massive, dark shapes began to rise from beneath the dust, pushing aside rock and ice. Dozens of them. World War II-era battleships, aircraft carriers, destroyers, all rusted, silent, and dark. An entire naval fleet, buried for eons, rising from their lunar grave. And on the deck of every single ship, a single silent figure in an ancient diving suit stood, their pale blue lights turning in unison to stare at our small excavation vehicle. The figure in front of me began to move again, dragging its anchor, taking slow, deliberate, impossibly heavy steps towards the opening we had cut in the hull. "We are leaving, now!" I roared, scrambling down from the torpedo tube. We turned and ran, back through the submarine that was now groaning and shifting as it was pushed upwards by the rising ghost fleet. We didn't look back at the 80 screaming shadows on the walls. We burst out of the conning tower and scrambled back towards the mole. The sight that greeted us was apocalyptic. A fleet of impossible, ancient warships, covered in the dust of ages, now sat silently on the lunar plain, under the harsh glare of our vehicle's lights. The silence of the moon had been replaced by the groaning of stressed metal and a low, pervasive hum that we could feel in our bones. We piled into the mole and sealed the hatch. "Gian, get us out of here! Maximum power! Don't look back!" As our vehicle sped away, I couldn't help but look back at the screen from the rear-facing camera. The figures in the diving suits were not pursuing us. They were simply standing on the decks of their impossible ships, watching us go. Silent sentinels of a forgotten war. Their purpose, a chilling, unanswered question. We made it back to Armstrong City. We sealed the blast doors. We told them what we saw. The distress call from the USS Manta has stopped, but a new signal has begun. It's broadcasting from the Schrödinger Basin on all frequencies. It's the same gurgling voice, speaking the same cryptic message over and over. The silent fleet sleeps below. The tide is coming in. The stars are not for you. No one knows what it means. No one knows what those things are or what they want. But we know one thing. We were not the first to reach the moon. We were just the first to make enough noise to wake the dead. And now, the silent fleet that has slept for an eternity in the cold, dark deep of space is finally awake. And it is waiting.